The soul of Western civilization, the rise, rule, and decline. Western civilization is not just a matter of history books, timelines, and maps. It is, at its heart, a soul, a living current of ideas, beliefs, dreams, and conflicts that has flowed from ancient times to our modern digital age. It is a soul born in stone temples, forged in bloodied battlefields, tested in cathedrals and laboratories, sung in symphonies, debated in parliaments, and now coded in algorithms. This soul, once defined by faith and fire, reason and rebellion, has risen to greatness, ruled with ambition, and now stands at a strange crossroads, unsure whether it is climbing higher or falling apart. To understand the West is to understand not just what happened, but why it mattered. It begins, as most epic tales do, in the ancient world, among the cities of Athens, Rome, Jerusalem, and later Constantinople. From Athens, we received the bold idea that truth could be found through reason and discussion. Philosophy was born there, Socrates asking annoying questions, Plato dreaming of perfect forms, and Aristotle studying everything from ethics to biology. Athens gave us democracy, not perfect, not inclusive, but revolutionary, the belief that free citizens could govern themselves. Meanwhile, Rome took that idea and added discipline, law, and empire. Roman roads, Roman armies, Roman law, it was an infrastructure of power that still echoes in today's governments and legal systems. Jerusalem, by contrast, gave the West its conscience. From Jewish prophets and scriptures came the belief in a moral universe, that humans have dignity, that life has meaning, that there is one God who cares about justice and mercy. These three cities, Athens, Rome, and Jerusalem, created the triangle of the Western soul, reason, order, and morality. Then came Constantinople, once Byzantium, reborn as the Christian capital of the Eastern Roman Empire. When Rome fell in the West in 476 AD, Constantinople preserved much of the classical knowledge and became the guardian of Christianity in the East. This East-West divide would later explode in the Great Schism of 1054, when the Christian Church officially split into Roman Catholicism and Eastern Orthodoxy, two lungs of one body now breathing separately. Still, even as Western Europe was thrown into chaos during the so-called Dark Ages, something quietly powerful was taking place, the slow but steady Christianization of Europe. Monks copied books, bishops baptized kings, and churches were built not just with stone but with faith. Christianity, once persecuted, became the guiding light of Western life, shaping everything: morals, art, law, family, holidays, identity.
But darkness never stays forever. Around the 14th century, in cities like Florence, Venice, and Paris, a new fire lit up the mind of Europe, the Renaissance. Meaning rebirth, it was exactly that, a rebirth of classical learning, creativity, curiosity. Artists painted the human form with stunning beauty. Thinkers rediscovered Plato and Aristotle. Explorers looked out to sea and wondered what lay beyond. Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Raphael, Machiavelli, Erasmus, these were the giants who revived the spirit of intellectual and artistic excellence. The Renaissance was the West remembering its ancient soul, but with a Christian conscience and a humanist heart. This renewal of the mind was followed by a renewal of the world. In the 15th and 16th centuries, Europe entered the age of discovery. Men like Columbus, Vasco da Gama, Magellan, and Cortez set sail across oceans, opening up new continents to European eyes and conquest. This brought immense wealth, new resources, and the beginnings of global trade. But it also brought suffering, colonialism, slavery, disease, destruction. The colonial revolution of expansionism and imperialism created empires, British, Spanish, Portuguese, Dutch, French, that stretched across the globe. The West saw itself as a civilizing force, but it often trampled those it claimed to uplift. It exported Christianity, capitalism, and culture, but also took land, lives, and liberty. While ships crossed oceans, ideas were shaking thrones. In 1517, Martin Luther launched the Protestant Reformation by challenging the Roman Catholic Church's authority. His call to reform created a spiritual earthquake that divided Europe along religious lines. Suddenly, people could read the Bible in their own language. Faith became personal. Nations redefined their identities. Wars broke out, but so did freedoms. The Reformation didn't just split churches. It opened the door to modern notions of conscience, literacy, and individual belief. Next came the scientific revolution, perhaps the most quiet but powerful revolution of all. From the 16th to 18th centuries, Western thinkers stopped guessing about the world and started measuring it. Copernicus said the Earth wasn't the center. Galileo proved it. Newton found the laws that held the universe together. The telescope, the microscope, the experiment, these tools became sacred. The West began trusting its eyes, its instruments, its mind. This revolution created medicine, engineering, astronomy, and the idea that truth could be discovered, not just declared. Which brings us to the Enlightenment, the era of reason, rights, and rebellion. Philosophers like John Locke, Voltaire, Rousseau, and Kant believed that human beings could govern themselves through logic, liberty, and law. They questioned monarchy, tradition, superstition. They imagined a world based not on inherited power, but on merit and justice. These ideas became the blueprint for revolutions. Especially the French Revolution in 1789. In the streets of Paris, people demanded liberty, equality, fraternity, and they took it by storm. Kings were beheaded. The church was stripped of power. A republic was born, then lost, then born again. It was chaos, but it was the beginning of the modern age. All these ideas collided in the Industrial Revolution, which began in 18th century Britain and transformed every part of life. Steam engines, factories, railroads, electricity, the physical world bent to the will of human invention. People moved to cities. Goods became cheaper. Life got faster. But there was a cost. Child labor. Pollution. The rise of slums. The West was getting richer, but it was also becoming more unequal. Still, progress marched on in medicine, engineering, education, and communication. This rapid change also gave rise to new ideologies. Some, like liberal democracy and capitalism, believed in markets, free speech, and elections. Others, like socialism, communism, and Marxism-Leninism, believed the system itself was unjust, that workers were being exploited, and that revolution was needed. Karl Marx, in particular, warned of class struggle and predicted the collapse of capitalism. His ideas spread like wildfire, especially in the 20th century. The Soviet Union, Mao's China, and other communist states tried to build new societies, often through horrific violence. The West, in turn, defended its model, a democratic, liberal, capitalist revolution that promised freedom, prosperity, and choice. The result was the Cold War, a decades-long chess game between two very different visions of the future. At the same time, the West faced internal revolutions. The feminist revolution demanded equality for women in law, labor, and life. The civil rights movements in the US and elsewhere fought racial injustice. Waves of immigration changed the cultural makeup of Western nations. The old idea of a single, unified Christendom gave way to pluralism and confusion. Then came the fascist and Nazi revolutions, dark chapters in which nationalism, racism, and militarism exploded into totalitarian regimes. Hitler's Germany and Mussolini's Italy hijacked the soul of the West, claiming to defend civilization while murdering millions, especially Jews. World War II was not just a battle of armies, it was a war for the soul of modern humanity. When it ended, the world was shattered, but something new rose from the ashes. Western nations formed NATO, built the European Union, and declared that never again would such horrors happen. Human rights, diplomacy, and international law became the pillars of peace. The soul of the West, long shaped by conflict, turned to cooperation, at least in theory. Finally, we come to the digital age, the computer revolution, the internet era, the world of online media and cyber everything. The West invented the computer, the microchip, the World Wide Web, social media, AI. Engines. The same culture that debated Plato now debates tweets. Information flows at light speed. Ideas, images, opinions, they flood our minds every second. It is the greatest tool of human connection ever built, and perhaps the most dangerous. So what is the soul of Western civilization? It is the tension between faith and reason, between freedom and responsibility, between the dignity of the individual and the needs of society. It is a civilization that believed in truth, pursued beauty, sought justice, and created systems, political, legal, religious, economic, artistic, to carry those ideals forward. It has given the world medicine, democracy, literature, universities, cathedrals, mathematics, symphonies, scientific breakthroughs, legal codes, and technological marvels. It also gave the world slavery, war, inequality, exploitation, and ecological destruction. But at its best, the West repents, reforms, and rebuilds. It dares to improve. Today, that soul feels fractured, unsure of its future, uncertain of its faith, questioning its past. But perhaps the greatness of Western civilization lies not in its perfection, but in its relentless pursuit of something higher, something more just, more free, more humane. It has fallen many times, but it also dares to rise again.
The Greco-Roman world of Athens, Rome, Constantinople, and Jerusalem. Western civilization began not as a single identity, but as a fusion, a marriage of cities, cultures, and worldviews. Athens gave it the mind, philosophy, democracy, rhetoric, and reason. Here, Socrates questioned the world, Plato imagined it anew, and Aristotle dissected its logic. These were not just abstract thinkers, they were builders of intellectual architecture. Rome, meanwhile, offered the body, a civilization of roads, law, governance, empire, and order. The Roman Republic and later the Roman Empire institutionalized justice, codified law, and defined the responsibilities of citizenship. Its ideals echo in every Western constitution. Jerusalem brought the soul, the spiritual and moral foundations through the Hebrew Bible and the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth. From this holy city radiated the Western moral conscience, the idea that every human life has divine value, that justice matters, that mercy is not weakness. Constantinople, the capital of the Eastern Roman Empire, preserved Christian theology, Roman statecraft, and Greek intellect through centuries of upheaval. These four cities, Athens, Rome, Jerusalem, Constantinople, are the pillars of Western civilization. Together they built a worldview that treasured reason, law, spirit, and endurance.
That's it.
The Christian Revolution and the Great Schism. The Christianization of the West is one of the most important revolutions in world history. Over centuries, the pagan world of gods and empires gave way to a new moral order centered on Christ. The cross replaced the sword as the symbol of victory. Pagan temples became churches. The emperor now bowed to a divine king. This revolution reached into hearts, not just borders. Christianity introduced love as a political force, humility as a virtue, and peace as an ambition. But unity did not last forever. In 1054, the church split in two, East and West, Greek and Latin, Orthodox and Catholic, in what became known as the Great Schism. It was a divorce over theology, language, power, and pride. This schism defined the spiritual geography of Europe for the next 1,000 years and shaped the distinct souls of Eastern and Western Christianity. Third, the Renaissance, rebirth of the Western soul. By the 14th century, a spark reignited the ancient flame of the West. The Renaissance was not just a return to classical knowledge, it was a rebirth of human potential. In the cities of Italy, especially Florence, thinkers rediscovered ancient texts. Artists like Michelangelo and Leonardo da Vinci celebrated the human form with sacred reverence. Writers such as Petrarch and Machiavelli redefined politics and virtue. Renaissance humanism placed man, not the monarchy or the church, at the center of inquiry, though not above God. It was a time of art, architecture, imagination, and bold experimentation. Gothic cathedrals gave way to domes and harmony. The soul of the West began to dream again, not just of heaven, but of the greatness humans could achieve on Earth. Four, the Age of Discovery and the Colonial Revolution. Fueled by ambition and faith, the West looked outward. The Age of Discovery, 15th to 17th centuries, was a new chapter of global expansion. Explorers like Columbus, Magellan, Vasco da Gama, and Cortés sailed beyond the known world. With them came trade, maps, spices, and gold, but also conquest, colonization, and destruction. The colonial revolution brought both glory and guilt. Empires grew, Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and with them came missionaries, merchants, and soldiers. The West spread its religion, law, and science, but also its violence, racism, and greed. Colonized people suffered, and civilizations were erased. Yet, through this process, the West became global and the world became westernized, for better and worse. The Protestant Reformation. In 1517, Martin Luther nailed his 95 Theses to the church door, unintentionally sparking a theological earthquake. The Protestant Reformation was not just about indulgences or papal power. It was about authority, conscience, and the right to think for oneself. Across Europe, reformers like Calvin, Zwingli, and later, John Wesley challenged centuries of centralized religious control. The Bible was translated into common tongues. Faith became personal. The printing press, invented by Gutenberg, became the great equalizer. Religious wars followed, the 30 Years' War, the English Civil War, but so did freedoms of worship, of thought, of belief. The soul of the West was now divided, but awakened. The scientific revolution, the 16th and 17th centuries saw the rise of a new priesthood, scientists. The scientific revolution replaced superstition with observation, authority with experimentation. Copernicus questioned the geocentric model. Galileo built telescopes and found moons orbiting Jupiter. Newton discovered gravity and laws of motion that govern the cosmos. This was more than science, it was a new way of thinking. Truth was no longer dictated, it was discovered. Nature became a book to be read, not feared. Mathematics, astronomy, biology, physics, the West made nature predictable, and in doing so, gained power over it. Seventh, the Enlightenment. With science came the Enlightenment, the age of reason. Philosophers like Voltaire, Locke, Montesquieu, and Rousseau wrote about liberty, reason, and the rights of man. The idea that truth could be arrived at without kings or priests was revolutionary. This era shaped modern democracies. The soul of the West became rational, skeptical, critical, and visionary. Tyranny, tradition, and ignorance were challenged. The mind was elevated. The idea of progress became central, the belief that tomorrow could be better if only we dared to think. The French Revolution. In 1789, the Enlightenment turned into revolution. The French Revolution was the collapse of monarchy and the explosion of democracy. The people rose against centuries of aristocratic abuse. They declared liberty, equality, fraternity, and then descended into bloodshed. The Reign of Terror, led by Robespierre, became a dark mirror of idealism. Yet the revolution inspired the world. Napoleon rose from its ashes and spread its ideals by sword. The French Revolution declared that the soul of a nation belongs to its people, and that sovereignty is not inherited, but earned. Ix. The Industrial Revolution. The 19th century brought the Industrial Revolution, a transformation as great as any war or empire. In Britain and then across Europe, steam engines, machines, and factories changed everything. Production exploded, so did cities. Life became faster, cheaper, more mechanical. This era gave us electricity, modern medicine, railroads, capitalism, and the first global middle class. But it also brought exploitation, child labor, and environmental destruction. Human labor became just another resource. The West had gained power over nature, but at what cost? X. The democratic, liberal, and capitalist revolution. Liberal democracy, born from Enlightenment ideals, spread in the 19th and 20th centuries. Governments based on elections, rule of law, free markets, and human rights emerged. Capitalism by inequality unleashed innovation, wealth, and competition. Western nations championed individual freedom, property rights, freedom of the press, and civil liberties. While imperfect and often hypocritical, these systems produced the most prosperous, scientifically advanced, and socially mobile societies in history. From universities to skyscrapers, constitutions to stock exchanges, the soul of the West dreamed of freedom with prosperity. The Feminist Revolution. The Feminist Revolution sought justice long denied. From Mary Wollstonecraft to Susan B. Anthony, women demanded the right to vote, to own property, to be educated, to exist as full persons under the law. In the 20th century, waves of feminism reshaped the family, the workplace, and the classroom. This was not merely political, it was civilizational. A society that once placed women as property now saw them as leaders, scientists, voters, and voices of conscience. The soul of the West had to admit it silenced half its genius. SWEF. The Communist, Socialist, and Marxist-Leninist Revolution. In response to capitalism's flaws, a new vision emerged: radical equality. Marx, Engels, Lenin, and Mao led the charge against class oppression. The Communist Revolution created new states, most notably the USSR, based on collective ownership, planned economies, and the abolition of class. While idealistic in theory, in practice it often led to authoritarianism, mass repression, and economic stagnation. The soul of the West was tested by this rival and nearly lost. The Cold War was a war of ideas: liberty versus equality, markets versus central plans, freedom versus control. Atheite, the classical fascist and Nazi revolution. When democracy stumbled, fascism rose. In Italy and Germany, nationalist, racial, and militarist ideologies promised strength through obedience. Hitler and Mussolini revived symbols of Rome while poisoning its ideals. The Nazi regime was the West's darkest hour: genocide, war, dictatorship. Yet, in defeating it, the West remembered its better soul. The post-war world built institutions, the UN, NATO, EU, to defend peace, dignity, and shared civilization. The European Union and NATO. After the carnage of 2 world wars, Western Europe finally chose unity over rivalry. The European Union became a grand experiment in peace through cooperation. NATO defended the West through military alliance, deterring aggression while preserving democracy. For a time, it seemed the soul of the West had matured, grown wise, humble, and humane. But underneath, questions still stirred. Who are we? What binds us? And how long can peace last? XV, the computer and digital revolution. Now, in the 21st century, the West has entered the digital age. Computers, the internet, smartphones, social media, artificial intelligence, these have transformed how we think, live, learn, love, and fight. The world is now connected by glass and code, but the soul of the West is at risk of disembodiment. Truth is fragile in the age of algorithms. Identity is scattered across screens. Meaning becomes a meme. Attention becomes currency, and privacy becomes an illusion. We can access all knowledge and still forget who we are. Sissek's conclusion: the rise, rule, and decline? The soul of Western civilization has climbed great mountains. It has believed in truth, fought for justice, built cathedrals, composed symphonies, cured diseases, and landed on the moon. It has birthed liberty and law, reason and beauty. And yet, it has also committed horrors: wars, slavery, exploitation, and erasure. The question is not whether the West was great, it was. The question is whether it still remembers why it rose, because it dared to pursue the good, the true, and the beautiful. If it forgets that, if it loses its memory, its humility, or its faith, then decline is not a question of if, but when. The soul of the West must be renewed, not just in wealth or power, but in character, wisdom, and truth. That is the final test of civilization. And it is the test now before us all. Would you like this?
The Golden Ages of Europe, the French Revolution, the Age of Discovery, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, the Scientific Revolution, the Industrial Revolution, the Protestant Reformation, the Classical Fascist and Nazi Revolution, the Soviet Communist Socialist Marxist Leninist Revolution of Marx, Engels, Lenin, Stalin, and Mao, the Feminist Revolution, the Democratic Liberal and Capitalist Revolution, the Colonial Revolution of Expansionism and Imperialism, European Union and NATO, the Christian Revolution of Christianization, the Computer Revolution, and the Greco-Roman world of the Roman civilization and Roman Empire. Thank you for watching the video. European Christendom, Western Society.